Up next is a panel discussion on search for profitability. We have Mr. Ashwin Damera, CEO, Eruditus and Emeritus. He is passionate about making quality education accessible to the leaders of tomorrow. He is also a prominent angel investor and advisor to multiple startups. Next, we have Mr. Ryan Wallace, founder, interview, Kickstart, angel investor, entrepreneur in residence at Accel Partners. Through his leadership and the success of Interview Kickstart, Mr. Ryan has established himself as a prominent figure in the field of technical interview preparation. This session will be moderated by Mr. Ravi Garikipati, co-founder of Davinta Finserv and ex-CTO of Flipkart. He is also a board member at NIIT, Access Mutual Fund, and 5paisa. He has also invested in multiple edtech startups. May I request the audience to type in their questions in the chat box. They will be answered at the end of this session. Over to you, Mr. Garikipati, for further deliberations.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you for that kind introduction. And good afternoon, Ashwin. Good afternoon, Ryan. And Ashwin, thank you
Hi,
for
Ravi.
having me. Second time around, really a pleasure to have you around, Ryan. First time around, I know what you can bring to the table. And I want to tee off without spending much time with my usual monologue. We constrain a little bit on the time. We have about 45 minutes, and we also have to set aside maybe about 5 minutes for audience to ask questions. And knowing the two of you, the kind of background that you bring to the table, I'm with a lot of thoughts going in my head. They're incessant since the last 2 days, and I have to rein myself in and zone in on few things. And I basically looking at two distinct set of audience potentially joining this session. One, those who are just embarking on this edtech journey, and they're early on in their journey, and they're also getting a little bit disillusioned with a few things that are unfolded in the recent past. And they are obviously folks who've been at it for a while, and they're at this crossroads in terms of figuring out profitability and what are some of the levers that they should be looking at actively as they're addressing profitability, having attained some semblance of growth. So those are the kind of two distinct sets, and who better than the two of you embarked on the journey? I think, Ryan, I know you started in 2014, and Ashwin probably about the same time or maybe even earlier, but I know for a fact both of you have built tremendously scalable, sustainable, profitable businesses. And I can't speak for that myself, having spent a good chunk of time at Flipkart. We've done a lot of wonderful things. Profitability is something that we're still chasing. So I get reminded of, you're a musician, Ryan. I get reminded of that Neil Young's number, searching for a pot of gold. So anyways, without much ado, let's dive into one thing. This is more to you, Ryan. I know in talking to you offline, one thing that struck out with me is when you build the business, you bootstrapped it, and profitability is not a second thought or an afterthought. It's ingrained in our basic DNA. And that's very that's something that caught my attention. And not many startups in the last few years have embarked their startup journey keeping that sort of a thought process at core. And also, and I just want you to sort of take a crack at it as to, what do you think are the key levers for profitability? We often talk about CAC, and there's more to it than just CAC. There are a bunch of other levers. Are there any picking out of there?
Okay, no, thanks, Ravi. Thanks. Welcome everybody. Lovely to be at this conference. Thank you, NIIT. And on a lighter side, Ravi, given that Ashwin is here the second time around, I feel much more comfortable because now I know he's a returning visitor, right? And so I know you're not going to bite our head off, but really nice to be here. Needless to say, I have a lot of appreciation for what Ashwin has built. I think we built something really incredible, but hats off to Ashwin for what he's built. We know each other outside this as well, and I've been watching, and I think that they are the preeminent edtech platform today, and I think doing absolutely amazing things. So Ashwin, publicly, super well done, dude. It's to say that to say that what you've done is spectacular would be an understatement of epic proportions, right? So let me get that out of the way. I think incredibly good job. We've also done our little bit. And Ravi, to get back to your point, like we were chatting this morning, I think that we have taken a slightly different path. For those of you who don't know what Interview Kickstart does, essentially we are building this go-to platform for tech talent all across the world to get empowered to build the skills to go to the best companies. And the reason we do that is very simple. We think that there is a power law in jobs, and the best jobs allow you the most compelling careers, right? And that's what we wish for everybody. Now, to what you mentioned, Ravi, we remained bootstrapped for a very long time. It was a conscious choice. We started with the view that we need to focus on two things to build a compelling business, right? One was obviously unbelievably good customer outcomes, because they are your advocates, and there is no business that has ever been built which is at scale and compelling without your customer speaking for you. Otherwise, it's just too expensive, right? And the second is compelling unit economics. And I think my background coming out of VC is what kind of schooled me in that. And so our thought process was from day one, we want to think about the entire stack and look at how to make this unbelievably profitable. The reason we went for EdTech is because tech is another word for efficiency. And so that has allowed us to drive efficiency through the process. My own framework on this, Ravi, is that one should look at this essentially in the form of a P&L, and that's the best framework. The best minds have thought about this. And so, you start from gross margin. A very high gross margin is what allows you to eventually have compelling EBITDA, right? So for me, the levers are: you first focus on gross margin, then you focus on contribution. And within contribution, we do talk a lot about CAC, but you have to look at your sales costs, you have to look at CAC, you have to look at your funnels, you have to look at all what's called under GTM, and then you have to look at your payroll costs. I think it's important not to do funky stuff and to look at this in a very calibrated manner. So that's the framework, right? That I would add. We chose the path of being bootstrapped till we got to significant scale. And the reason we chose that is because we realized that necessity is the mother of all invention. And so that is a great forcing function for us to build compelling customer outcomes with a business that throws up cash, right? So that's my own experience. Happy to dive into this a bit more if required.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I'll come back to you, and we'll probably get into the nuances of some of the levers as you're looking at P&L architecture, and heading towards EBITDA, all the levers at CM1, CM2, and eventually get to EBITDA positive. So we'll get to that, but you set the stage nicely, Ryan. We'll come back to you. Ashwin, Ryan preempted everything I was going to say about you and the wonderful business that you built. And it's our pleasure to have you second time around. And with you, it would be a travesty if I don't embark on the nuances of being able to build a edtech business at scale with profitability. I think that's something you've been able to do it, and you're one of the rare find in terms of entrepreneurship in that regard. And you too, like Ryan, were not too keen to raise money too soon. You did all things right, I would say most things right. Got to a point where all the bases are in place before you even looked at raising money. And that's something that I admired a lot in your entrepreneurship. So my question more about the entrepreneurs who've been around for a while. They think they are gotten some mojo around the growth, and they have their own playbook in terms of getting growth engine going, and now they're dabbling with the idea of bringing profitability, and that's where they typically run into this conundrum of growth versus profitability. And it to me, it's not just one a switch that you turn on one fine day, and there's a method to the madness. And I want to pick your brains as to how you waded through that journey. And the second, once you invest into getting hold of the customer, how do you actually maximize the LTV as well? And that lends itself into the profitability nicely. So if you can focus on those two and help audience, that'll be great.
Thank you, Ravi, and thank you both Ravi and Ryan for your kind words, and to NIIT for having me here. It's a great privilege. Look, whenever we talk about profitability and growth, or profitability versus growth, I'm reminded of an anecdote. I don't know how many of you have heard this. This is a story of Tenali Rama, and the goddess comes up in front of him and says, "Look, I can give you one of two things. I can give you wealth, or I can give you knowledge. Now choose one." Right? And in many cases, I'm sure the angst, the conflict that was brewing in Tenali Rama's head is kind of what all of us entrepreneurs have to do: not knowledge and wealth, but profitability versus growth, right? But I'm tempted to do what Tenali Rama did, which, without batting an eyelid, he grabbed both the pots, drank it. Then he said, "Oh, goddess, you're so great. How could I refuse both these offerings from you?" So some flattery worked, and he was forgiven. But he got knowledge and wealth. And so the kind of the gold standard for startups is growth and profitability, right? Let me also just caveat a little bit though. I just want people to realize that, look, many great startups have also been built without being profitable. Flipkart, Ravi, is a great example. Amazon is a great example for many years. But they had unit economics that were improving. They had certain reasons for that. And so I just want to make this point. When we talk about growth, I want to make this distinction between good growth and bad growth, right? Look, as a company this year, we'll do about 4,000 odd crores. We'll be profitable for about 5% EBITDA. The question is, could we have been 8% EBITDA? The answer perhaps could have been yes, right? But we are also investing in certain measures which I consider good growth. So what is good growth, right? So for example, if you're expanding into a new market, let's say we're going into South America or Japan, where we know it's going to take us 2 years to sign up universities. So our initial investment in people and admin is not going to return profitability. If you're hiring people in certain markets to go and do enterprise sales, if you're building into tech, if you're launching new courses for which there's a lot of course creation, this is not bad. So this will, of course, reduce your profitability or increase your losses, but it's revenue down the road. And as long as it's good unit economics down the road, I still consider this good growth. So if a company came to me and said, "Look, we are growing faster, but it's good growth, and as a consequence, we're going to be more profitable down the road," I think most people would be okay with that. However, there's also bad growth, right? And bad growth is, I'm spending 40%, my gross margin is 50%. I'm already spending 40% on CAC. Let me spend another 10%. So basically, I'm zero contribution, but I'm going to grow further 10, 15%, right? Or, I remember my earlier startup in travel, our gross margins were 25%, and we used to do 25% cashbacks. I mean, maybe I'll blame it on my youth at that point of time, but, it's a horrible place to be. That's bad growth, right? And so that in that scenario, you'd rather not have that top line growth, you'd rather have profitability. So really for me, this thing about profitability versus growth has to be looked at the nuanced version of growth. I'm also just going to make one other point. If an entrepreneur had to choose between growth and profitability, right? And look, you ideally don't have to make that choice. But I'm more tempted to look at companies that have demonstrated consistent year-on-year growth and have the potential to look at growth for many years to come, which means there's massive TAM and there's very good product market fit. And you can imagine if the contribution level economics are good, they can obviously be profitable. There is a danger of trading off growth. Assume a company is not going to grow at single digit, but is going to show profitability. There's a danger to that, which is that, hey, maybe your TAM is not large enough. Maybe you're tapping out in terms of where you are. And you see today in EdTech, given the funding winter and all of that, many companies are not able to continue to grow because they've moved the dial towards profitability. The really good standout companies will be able to grow and grow profitably.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely. I think one point that really worth underlining and emphasizing further is, It's not going to be growth at any cost, nor it's going to be let's optimize for profitability without any regards to growth. And I'm glad you've given some credence to Amazon's business and Flipkart business. Yes, as long as there's a positive unit economics, and you can continue to invest, keeping in view your long-term vision and strategy. But if those fundamentals are questionable and flawed, then obviously you have to go to the drawing board. I think you made that point very well, in addition to everything else you said. Ryan, going back to what we just teed off with, I'm going to take your view on the conventional thinking, not so conventional 10 years ago in the recent past. The general thought process is, look, get your PMF as quickly as possible, and then get to a positive unit economics, and then grow the business on the back of those two milestones, and then look for your cost leakages and optimize, and then amplify the growth, and eventually you get to the profitability. That's the largely the playbook. This is someone who is doing well would actually articulate. There are many who are not even following this chronology. Do you think there's still enough steam and legs with that sort of a playbook? Something ought to change given what we're seeing in the recent past. I just wanted to take your thought on that.
I think both Ashwin's experience and our experience, right, are common in some areas, right? I think the key two areas of commonality are neither of us rushed to raise money. I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind. What I find when I speak to many entrepreneurs, young and let's call us middle-aged, right? They see valuation as a mark of success, right? And in many cases, we joke internally that they see VCs as the real customers, and like that is not how you build a big business, right? That's not how you build a compelling business. So I think there is credence to everything you said, like product market fit, raising your first round of money, figuring out how to grow, profitability, so on and so forth. I think two important things to keep in mind, right? And I can just talk from our own experience. One is the product market fit phase is super important. It is critical to make sure that you find something that just works. It works well. There is a large, compelling need. And like Ashwin said, there is scale, because as a founder, you are going to spend a minimum of 10 years of your life doing this, right? I think the second thing which we should also just understand is that a lot of what we saw in the recent past, right, is a function of the macro, which has fundamentally changed. And so, Ravi, I think the reason I want to bring this up is because I think the way businesses are going to be built in the next few years is different. And that is because money and funds were unbelievably cheap in the last few years, right? We saw interest rates of zero, negative interest rates. Now interest rates are high, and there is no sign of them coming down anytime soon, right? Across the board. In that environment, capital is, I don't want to say scarce, but it's expensive, right? And so it would be more important moving forward to engineer your business in a way, or gear your business in a way that it is not only strong in terms of a PMF, but also super capital efficient, right? I want to just, teeing off from what Ashwin said, good growth and bad growth. Let me just tell you one interesting way that we think about this. And I think it is the sister of good growth and bad growth, right? And that is, there is earned growth and there is paid growth, right? We think that there is far more value in earned growth, because that is what leads to much more compelling unit economics down the way. Google and Facebook are the largest and the greediest landlords in the world, right? And they're extremely temperamental. They change stuff a lot, and that's exactly what they need to be doing for their scale of business. Our view is that in the years to come, you have to understand that cash is scarce. Sorry, cash is expensive. It is important to have stronger product market fit, important to have efficiency as a critical part of the business, work towards earned growth, or as we internally call it, proprietary acquisition, right? Those are some of the key things that that matter to us. And that's how we think. I think what is difficult in general for founders is to not get swayed by some of the narrative within which you exist. So, when money was very cheap, the pendulum was at one end. Now money is expensive, the pendulum's at the other end. One has to stay very measured, celebrate your success, don't be too hard with failure, and you have to keep going and work within the constraints of where the market is. And so, that's how I think about at least building for the next few years. Whether you are at Ashwin's level, whether you are us, whether you are somebody just getting started, everybody has to keep that in mind.
Well said, Ryan. There are a ton of quotable quotes, and I like the way you said that there's a huge distinction between earned growth versus paid growth, and how many given the ease at which we've been able to raise funds in the past, and oftentimes our go-to-market will index big time on paid marketing, and as you rightly said, and I like that phrase as well. If Meta and Google and a bunch of others are greedy landlords, and they keep surprising you for the worse. So it's important that you have your PMF and right go-to-market, and not rely overly on the paid. So well said. Ashwin, coming back to you, I know you're one such entrepreneur, not only seen great success, build scalable business, but you also gone international. You're, if I understood right, you're there in multiple geographies, and I don't sit here and imagine that you use the same one size fits all GTM. You got your own distinctive playbook for each geography. And also, I'm again hazarding a guess here. Given your multi-geo focus, you probably rely quite a bit on hybrid, if not digital-only approach, and there's a lot of tech play there as well to deliver your service at scale without compromising on the experience. And that's another conundrum folks in the recent past throwing at us, right? Look, people went too far down the digital route, and now that didn't necessarily play out well, and the answer is not to go offline completely. What is the optimum hybrid? When you say hybrid, it sounds cool, but what is the optimum level there? And if you can actually speak to this in the context of your multi-geography expansion, both from the GTM and tech relevance standpoint.
So it's very interesting, Ravi. So we started in 2010. We were an offline business focused on India. And around 2015, we tried to raise money. And most VCs rejected us. Many reasons, but one of the reasons given is that we were an offline business and therefore we are not scalable. And today I look back and every VC that is saying, where is your offline strategy? Right. And so, these things come around, and, for people who've been around long enough, you see many cycles of this, not just one. But the way I answer this is not so much, what the VC is asking, right? You have to ask yourself, can you serve your customer better, or can you reach more customers, or do you have any other compelling reason for you to go online or offline or hybrid? So I'll give you a couple of examples. The moment we went online in 2015, we suddenly realized that 100% of our people were in India, but our courses were from an MIT, a Columbia, a Dartmouth, and other schools. Now we have about 85 university partners. These are brands that resonate across the world. So we started getting students from South America, from Vietnam, China, of course, US, India, all of that. And then later on, we evolved to having go-to-market teams in these local geographies, right? And online was a great way to reach them. But we also started realizing that for many of our senior participants, that they think of a course as having three components: intellectual capital, brand capital, and social capital. And the combination of this is career capital, right? But the social capital for a senior audience is about meeting in person, networking, meeting with the faculty, their groups, etc. And so we always embrace the fact that, hey, some amount of pedagogy delivered in person is actually very good. And of course, that always made sense for us because we come from an offline background. So going offline, we were always offline. So, it didn't matter to us. But there was a reason for us to do that. Similarly, when you think about online, in a market like the US where we operate, I think online acquisition is sufficient. You don't need to be offline when you look at the acquisition side of the funnel. But in a market like India, perhaps in tier 2, tier 3, having some offline distribution is important if you want to go and penetrate those markets. But your reasons to either be online or offline have to be very clear versus, today you have some companies, take examples in test prep who are started off as online, but there's no growth there, they're going offline, which is more about a reactionary approach to, existential business model question. I really think every entrepreneur must frame online, offline, or hybrid based on these two characteristics, right? Am I going to reach more customers? Am I going to serve my existing customers better?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Couldn't have said any better. Great insights there. I see a few questions keep coming up from the audience as well. Ryan, I'll just engage in a bit of discussion with both of you on one other aspect, and then we'll start looking at the questions from the audience. This is more since Ashwin did bring it up in some form or shape, the relevance of technology. We always believe, and me particularly being a technologist and being a CTO all my life, I fundamentally respected businesses that were disrupted by technology, not just enablement, disruption. And I know EdTech, there's a reason why tech is suffixed. So, hopefully it has a merit and place even today. More so with the advent of Gen AI and so on and so forth. Where do you see, the new age EdTech companies that are going to be in the pipeline in the near future? How do you see them adopting, or what are some of the recommendations in terms of areas where they should really focus from a tech-led disruption standpoint?
On a lighter note, I think Ashwin and I both hope that we are part of the new edtech companies embracing generative AI, and that we are, we're not necessarily seen as old school middle-aged guys who don't know what's going on and are not in touch with reality. We are, far younger than we look. So I think that's one important thing to keep in mind. We are the new we are the new edtech sets of players. But I think, Ravi, that's a fantastic question, and I think really everybody should be thinking about this, both as an individual, as potential learners, companies, so on and so forth. This is a massive platform shift, as I'm sure and being a technologist yourself. I joke with people saying that there was BC and AD, and that was not half as important as like pre-AI and post-AI, right? It's like generative AI pre and post, and I think we are seeing things completely different. Allow me to answer this in 2 or 3 parts. I think for us in particular, I think AI as a opportunity on the course side, on the teaching side, it's a big opportunity for us. And the reason it's a big opportunity for us is, I think what distinguishes us as a platform is that we are company-focused knowledge, right? And so we try and drive courses. We don't have certifications, we don't have degrees, as an example. So think of us as the opposite of Ashwin, right? That we are the counter thought process in many ways, obviously doing a lot of stuff similarly, but we see that as a big opportunity for us to expand in the spirit of being transparent. Our AI courses are now 40% of our business in the last 1 year, right? And so that's a compelling opportunity, I think, for everybody on the course side. I think generative AI is extremely powerful, Ravi, because it also allows you to fundamentally change the way you operate as a business, right? And so we internally have set up a separate team of folks who are actively looking to use generative AI in every single process of the company. right from, as extreme as finance and accounting, right? We want to try and figure out how we can bring in generative AI to change the way we operate the entire stack. But uniquely to education, there are some unbelievable use cases, as I'm sure Ashwin would also be driving, given their pedigree. And that is, generative AI allows you to put yourself in a position where you can have truly customized learning for every individual, right? And that was a holy grail, right? The holy grail of learning is that somebody teaches you what you want to know in the way that you want, one-on-one at massive scale. Generative AI unlocks that, right? And so we are unbelievably excited about this. Obviously, people talk about things like AI tutors, which I'm sure all top companies are working on. But I think we are just at the start of this. So I think there has rarely been something in the last few years which has been as exciting as this, because I think it can, to summarize, it's a huge opportunity from an expansion perspective externally. It's also a huge opportunity for you as a company to reinvent your stack. And let me leave everybody with this. Any company that is not thinking about how to get significantly AI enabled, and any individual that is not thinking about how to get AI enabled, is really missing the bus. Because we are at a point today where the gap between who is a novice or an early adopter and who is an expert or the advanced adopters, that is the smallest it is ever going to be, right? So we think this is a game changer.
No, absolutely. And Ryan, I'm so glad that you spoke about two aspects of the greater impact that Gen AI could offer to everybody right off the bat. While we oftentimes talk about the efficiency game, you can get better at your creating a curriculum and course content, and it'll impact your bottom line, largely efficiency play. But you took the time to index on the other aspect, which is experience for the end customer, right? Personalization at scale, right? And now, and that's
sorry, Ravi, just to add something there. I don't want to give the false sense that this is a fait accompli and done and it's very easy, because when we joined and the previous speakers were speaking, they mentioned about hallucinations. Hallucinations are a real thing, right? And so everybody is going to have to work around those sort of hallucinations as well. But I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely Elon Musk is working on exactly solving that problem. He says, I'm going to come with my own foundation model minus hallucinations. So let's wait for it. Ashwin, back to you. This is, I know there's one question I definitely want to get to that. And if you can quickly, cover this question. I thought this would be also of some importance. The role of content will play as we look towards building a profitable business. I think, just like you're tweaking bunch of things, I also feel like, how the content, both across many dimensions, the format, the duration, the delivery modality, they all have some bearing on, your cost structure and also uptick, right? So I know in your longer journey, you sort of dabbled with many things. And how do you actually get to the right format, both from format type standpoint, delivery standpoint, and then the duration? I know you have varying types of courses and curriculum that you offer. What is there any science behind it, or just intuition, or is there any experimentation framework that you have to arrive at the right one?
Yeah, look, I think there's a very broad spectrum, right? At one level, you have MOOCs that is just very bite-sized, but it's pure content. There's no engagement, there's no service, there's application. And the other end, you have, say, a university or kind of a boot camp type product, which is very intensive. Our own belief, my own belief, and the DNA of the company is that education must have a delta on a student, which means the person coming into a program to the person coming out of the program, there has to be a delta, right? And you can study many models of education, but most often delta happens when there is application and when there is feedback. So in my view of kind of the design of a course, content, whether it is live, asynchronous, reading, auditory, whatever visual, whatever the form of the content, that's very important. It's a very essential building block. But more important than just that is the application of that. So you have to think of, imagine you're running negotiations. You can go to a Coursera or Khan Academy and watch video lectures, but you're not going to become a better negotiator, right? So we spend a lot of time actually building simulation, doing role plays, and then reviewing that with people saying, what could you have done differently? And we believe the outcome of that is a better negotiator, right? Now, that this broad approach will have different manifestations on whether you're teaching a kid or a grown up, whether you're teaching, say, coding, or whether you're teaching more executive presence. But the core philosophy and approach is this, right? It's kind of like what MIT said when they said their motto is mens et manus, minds, but also hands, learning by doing. And so for me, the decision on content, Ravi, is guided by that philosophy, but it manifested very differently across regions or type of programs, demographics, etc.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Ashwin. Very, very insightful. And I think people have to, embark on the philosophy such as what you just called out. And today, not knowing exactly what their fundamental business, who their segment is, they're just aping what worked for others. That may not necessarily be the solution. So yeah, folks who are attending, they will do well paying attention to what Ashwin just said. So now we'll, gentlemen, we'll just get to the couple of questions that I have here. Hopefully we have enough time. I'm just reading them out in the order in which they showed up. There's the one here I see in the chat box. How can companies navigate the evolving landscape of digital transformation to optimize profitability amidst market disruptions? Anyway, who wants to take this up? Ashwin, you want to go with this?
Well, look, the question is too broad.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to answer this. It's very difficult to answer this question. But I think at a very high level, every disruption, and education is also being disrupted as we speak, provides opportunities. It's not clear which space you're playing in. I am very bullish on technology being more than a disruptor. I would say being a digital enabler for higher education. K-12, the jury is out, not just because of one player in trouble, but in general. Test prep, I mean, again, I'm not very familiar with that space, but for higher education, I really do see technology and edtech being partners to higher education providers, not actually disruptors as much as digital enablers. And I think there's a massive opportunity there.
No, I'm not going. And you said it, and I think given the broader nature of the question, I think you hit the nail on that. Technology of many things that we could do in the evolving digital transformative landscape, that had to be at the center of everything. But we'll get to the next one. I know questions broad, our answers also tend to be a little broad, but we have only so much time left. This next one, what role does market research play in identifying profitable niches within the tech sector, and how can startups effectively conduct this research? Ryan, I'm not doing inky pinky ponky here. Ryan,
I'll take a shot of this.
Yeah.
Let me say something funny. Would anybody believe me if I said that market research plays zero role? It obviously plays a lot of role. I think my own view, and I can tell you my own view. I'm sure Ashwin has his own view. And I'm sure every tech founder has their own view. My own view is that try and reverse engineer this, right? Let me suggest a framework, right? Use digital marketing, use keyword research, use dummy landing pages, use things like this, right? To figure out, test what is working. Today, you have the tools where you don't have to just go and try something and make it work, because you want to be a good person or, a hardworking person. You have to be a smart worker, right? And so definitely you should do market research, but I would not go the traditional way. I would go a more growth-focused way and saying, okay, like my own view of doing this is let's put out a bunch of ads, let's put out a bunch of landing pages, Let's look at data that's there online. Let's try and reverse engineer this. Let's try and get some good signals, and then move forward. I would encourage everybody to also, you learn the best from other founders, and so talk to other founders. I reach out to Ashwin, right? Sometimes ask him questions that might be absolutely ridiculous, but I'm not shy of asking those questions because he is, he's being polite and laughing, indicating that I don't ask ridiculous questions. But he's a few steps ahead of me, right? And there are other people that I'm a few steps ahead of. So talk to folks, reach out. But market research definitely plays an important role. I just think there is a much smarter way of doing it versus doing it, the grunt research way. And you can use digital very effectively to do this. I would encourage everybody to go and use the growth marketing framework to try and think about market research. I think that's a far more efficient way. But that's just my view.
No. Well said, Ryan. In fact, everything that we could be doing, I think, folks do end up doing that, in my opinion. And there's enough science and well documented in terms of some of the ways by which one would do research. But where I think people don't pay as much attention is what you just said. Personally, I've learned a lot when I interact with thought leaders, in addition to reading up a Gartner or a Forrester industry research analyst reports, right? Speaking to thought leaders and the practitioners, such as yourself, Ashwin, you can learn a ton, right? And fortunately, India is also morphing itself to be a robust ecosystem where you do get those founders who are willing to share their experiences, much like what I experienced back in the day in Valley. And we are truly in that same zone here in India. So I think it's upon founders are there to reach out to the practitioners, and they'll learn a ton. Yeah. With that, I know I see Neha popping up, and probably we are constrained by time.
Ravi,
And
I'm going to just interrupt for 1 second because I think
please.
this is a useful thing. Let me ask Ashwin a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
For the audience, Ashwin, if this is your second fairly scale startup, right? If you were to look back at this dude and you were to tell your younger self, hey, here is something that you should worry about more, or here is something that you should not worry about as much. And the reason I'm asking this question is because from what I understood from Ravi, there were a lot of folks who are at different stages in the revolution as entrepreneurs. What would you tell them?
First of all, I'm telling you, this question is out of syllabus.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed
Dude, I'm all about out of syllabus questions.
And our time is already up, so the exam centers are already shut down. So I'm not even expected to answer this. But look, since you asked that, let me quickly, I don't want to get in the way of Anand and the panel that is coming after us. But very quickly, I think this is the message I would say, look, if you read the newspaper, and if you read it today, yesterday, day before, there's a lot of doom and gloom about tech. But truly speaking, if you look at the larger demographics of India or globally, this is a great time to be in edtech, whether it's edtech, education, etc. For me, actually, one thing that I've learned in my 2 startups is that in startups you can't control the outcome. Nobody knows when they're starting that they're going to be successful, right? But if you know that you're working on a problem that's close to your heart, which in this particular case for me in education, every day I feel inspired by one student who comes back and writes and says, your course changed my life. Pursue something, whether it's education or somewhere else, that is close to your heart, then the journey itself will be enjoyable. The outcome is not completely in your hands. A lot of it is luck. But my one life lesson is that pursue something that you're passionate about. More likely that the outcome will be good versus if you're pursuing a journey just for the outcome. That's the one thing that I'll say. And I'll also say this, that we need hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs in education to make sure that India gets its demographic dividend. One Ryan, one Ashwin, one bunch of people here won't do it. So actually, this is a great time for anybody who's really seriously passionate about doing education, who has a good value system to start up. And if there are some people who come out of this session over this half a day thinking more seriously about education, then hats off to NIIT for putting up this EdTech event.
Awesome. Let me end on a funny quote. Somebody asked Brad Pitt once, and I think it's a very relevant thing here. What matters? And picking up from Ashwin, does the journey matter or the destination? And he said, you know what? It's really the company. So what Ashwin is saying is, we as founders, we are looking for other good founders to have good company and have amazing journeys and reach an outstanding destination. Thank you, NIIT. Thank you, Ravi, Ashwin. Always awesome fun.
Thank you, gentlemen. On that note, let me conclude. It's been absolute pleasure engaging with both of you. I learned a ton, and Ashwin, I'm going to take a rain check again for the third one, and Ryan,
Repeat.
I'm not going to let you off the hook as well. So yeah, hopefully the audience who clued in, they've enjoyed it just as much as I did, and thank you both. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. All the best.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for such an insightful discussion.